think we've had enough round of applause so far, have we?
Amazing audience.
I know, absolutely incredible. So we've got lots of questions that people have emailed in beforehand, and we've also got questions that you tweeted in with the hashtag #QuestionTim, not to be confused with Question Time. That's a different show. I'm not sure whether you get that one or not. Or
Not so much.
But I'm just going to start by asking both of you, what does it mean to be here tonight, to be able to tell the story of space exploration and why it matters?
It's very special. I mean, it's wonderful to have the privilege of flying into space. But part of that is to try and share the journey as much as possible. So coming around to visit here, I mean, before this I was in Leicester and Cardiff and Manchester, Salford and Glasgow, and heading on to Belfast tomorrow. And it's really important to come here and try and share the experience that we've had, but also to try and help to explain what we're doing in space and why we're doing it and why it's helping people here back on Earth.
I personally think it's very important, especially for young people, to understand what we're doing. I was inspired as a 6-year-old when we were landing men on the moon, and then re-inspired as a college student when we had some former Apollo astronauts come and speak at my school. So I think, just the impact that it had on me and the motivation that it gave me to work hard in school, had an amazing impact. I think perhaps if we can relay our story, we can do the same thing.
And you mentioned the moon landings and how that inspired you. And I think many people of a generation, it did. And I almost think with space exploration, we had a bit of a lull after Apollo, but space is really becoming exciting again. I was just wondering what excites you both about what's happening in space at the moment, other than the missions you've been involved in?
And what excites me is looking to the future. I love the past. The past is very inspiring as well, and it's really the kind of stories and the things that focused our attention on becoming astronauts. But looking to the future, it's incredibly exciting. We've probably got space station operations going out till 2024, maybe a little bit longer. But we're really in the phase now where we're starting to plan those next missions to asteroids, a return to the moon, missions to Mars, and also commercial vehicles coming on. So we're looking at some new spacecraft flying in the next few years, and NASA's Orion spacecraft, which is going to be supported by Europe's service module. I mean, very exciting missions.
I think we're perhaps at a tipping point when it comes to space exploration, both human space exploration, but also that's really been sponsored or really been initiated by the private sector. There's lots of small satellites that are being deployed now because you can actually monetize the data. The technology for sensors has gotten smaller. There are some private companies making their own rockets now, and so I think there's going to be a really exciting future over the next couple of decades. And
if you could predict, where do you think we'll be in 50 years' time? Do you think we'd have sent humans to Mars by then?
I'd be disappointed if we hadn't in 50 years. I think 50 years we should be well on the way with the Mars missions. And as I mentioned in the presentation there, I think psychologically and physiology, human physiology, we are not going to have a problem with that. We have some technical challenges such as radiation shielding, propulsion techniques, trying to shorten that journey to Mars. And certainly radiation shielding on Mars as well, as we're operating on a habitation base. But nothing that I'm sure that we can't overcome in the next couple of years.
There's also a moon out there. Yeah. You might have seen it before. It's pretty close, right?
Would you guys walk? I know Jan Warner, who runs ESA, has talked about a vision for a moon village. I mean, both of you, would you walk on the moon? I know it's an obvious question, but given the chance.
I think you're going to get nods all around here, yeah.
And do you think, in a way, it's a shame that it's been, 44 years almost since we last walked on the surface of the moon? Or do you think it's something that had to happen in order for us to progress to where we are now?
If you talk to people that were teenagers or adults back in the moon race days, the space race days, they would have been shocked if we weren't on the moon by the time that we are now. And so I think, perhaps we haven't lost our way, but there's a lot more that we can do. And I hope that we can really progress and take those next big steps.
Do you think maybe we jumped into cyberspace instead of into outer space?
Perhaps. Yeah, it's really hard to predict how things transfer over time.
And just before we get to some of your questions, because we've still got quite some time, in terms of, you mentioned Tim Peake, in terms of humans and robots working together. And we've had some incredible, particularly within Europe, some incredible robotic missions. So Rosetta, we're going to Mars this week with the ExoMars lander. What robotic missions excite you, and what do you think the potential is to both of you, I guess, in terms of robotic missions within our lifetime? Are we talking a lander on Europa, which is one of the moons of Jupiter where there might be life, or are we talking maybe sending more probes beyond the solar system?
Yes, I mean, the missions that excite me are those precursor missions, the ones that are really groundbreaking. They're going out to parts of our solar system that we've never explored before. And even now, of course, we have with Voyager beyond our solar system. It's incredible. We've actually to think that, you know, humans have sent something outside of our solar system. But no, I think Martian exploration is very exciting because Mars is a very similar planet to ours. It's a rocky planet. It's extremely likely that it had an ocean, and therefore it could have supported life at some point in its billion years of history. So I think to start investigating that and to try and search for those signs of life is very exciting. But as you mentioned there, we're now stretching to the moons of Saturn and Jupiter. And wow, I mean, to think that planet or moons like Europa with icy crusts could have liquid oceans beneath them, and we could be sending landers to those kind of locations. They're very exciting missions too.
I think robotics to asteroids is going to be really amazing over the next 20 years because, you know, the human spaceflight piece has all the complexity of trying to support humans in space, whereas if the private sector finds that there's an economically viable reason to go to asteroids, I think it's going to take off like wildfire.
And would you not argue that throughout history, you know, what we're doing actually isn't new? It might sound like science fiction, mining an asteroid, but throughout history, we went somewhere new. It was a one-way trip. We lived off the land. Do you think the same is going to happen with space?
Well, I think so. I think you almost have to for us to really get to the next step. You have to either live off the land or make it economically viable.
And in terms of Mars, both of you, do you think that it is possible that, you know, technically a kid within this room, someone listening to you now, could potentially walk on the surface of Mars?
Absolutely, yes. It's something I've been saying throughout this whole tour, that, you know, looking at the younger people in the audience, they are the generation, you know, that could set foot on Mars.
That's just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think we should move on to some we've got so many questions from you guys, and of course I'll be keeping across the Twitter ones as well. So we're going to go back to the space station. This is from 10-year-old Thomas, and I'm going to apologise if I haven't pronounced your last name correct. It's Thomas Sewell, who's 10, and his mother emailed in, what was your favourite experiment on the International Space Station and why? Favourite experiment?
Guys, well, as I kind of said in the presentation, I think that some of my favorite experiments were those that we participate in the most as astronauts, because a lot of the experiments, we're actually really the operators. Of course, the scientists are on the ground, and they've put hundreds, if not thousands of hours of work into their experiment, and we're running it on board the space station. But running an experiment is different to actually participating in it. So the life science experiments I loved, and you know, some of the things I'd never done an ultrasound on my eye or on my heart or on various other parts of my body. But, you know, we get involved in all of these kinds of tests. And there was one called airway monitoring where we used the airlock. We actually, Tim and I both had to go inside the airlock, reduce the pressure in there, and then do some tests on the amount of nitric oxide that our bodies were producing. Incredible experiments. So I really enjoyed those life science experiments.
You know, I'd have to say the same thing. The ultrasounds were particularly fun because it was a really neat example of teamwork with the ground. So you have this probe and you're looking at a screen and you're looking at your blood flow, your muscles, your arteries.
Are you squeamish?
No, not at all, thankfully. But these guys and gals on the ground were so talented, they could tell you, hey, just move the probe a little bit, 5 degrees this direction, and then the picture would just open up and they would get exactly what they wanted. So being able to work closely with them, I think, was probably the most satisfying part.
And actually, I think you raise a good point, because you guys really are just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other jobs and professions which are enabling you to explore space. I mean, how valuable is the support you get from all of the teams on the ground?
We couldn't do our job without the ground. In fact, you know, it's going to be a challenge for us to take that next big step, because ISS is definitely a team effort, both from the standpoint of the systems on board and the science. And that next vehicle has to work very autonomously.
And just in terms of you, Tim, obviously, being British and being an astronaut is slightly harder, well, was thought once of being slightly harder, but you've shown it is possible and that Britain really is a key player in space. What message would you give to people who might want to be an astronaut who are British?
Yes, I mean, hopefully we're trying to show that space is more accessible than perhaps people first thought. And the UK is very firmly a part of the European Space Agency. It will continue to be a part of the European Space Agency. And so hopefully they can see someone like myself who just went to ordinary primary school and ordinary comprehensive school, joined the army at 19, and then ended up as an astronaut. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
I'm not sure about that, but okay, we've got some more great questions here for you. I really like this one actually. It's from Duncan Glenn, who's 12 years old. And how is the International Space Station heated?
You know, it's interesting that you would think that you would have to heat space station because it's in the vacuum and it's super cold out there. It turns out that you have to reject heat. So it's actually the opposite problem. And so what we do is we collect up heat and water. The heat in the water is transferred to ammonia, and that's outside, and we have a heat transfer device, and that transfers that heat. And then the ammonia is pumped out to radiators and dispersed out into space.
And one really interesting thing about that is Tim mentioned about the emergencies on the space station, and one of the possible emergencies that could happen is that this interface where the ammonia interfaces with the water is that there's a possibility, a very remote possibility, that ammonia could get into our atmosphere. And that would be one of our 3 most serious emergencies, along with fire and depressurization.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are the things you not fear because you're trained, but the things you're most concerned about as astronauts on the space station?
Yes, so the 3 big ones are fire, and obviously we have a history of fire on spacecraft with the Mir space station. Depressurization, there's a lot of space debris out there these days. The space station is frequently pinged by lots of small micrometeorites, and largest pieces of space debris are being tracked by ground radar. So the space station now quite frequently has to do an orbital adjustment, a reboost, to take it out of the way of any debris. So the but of course, if a big piece of debris struck the space station and ruptured the hull, we would start to lose pressure. So we've got the fire, the depressurization, and that ammonia that I talked about, a toxic atmosphere.
And you mentioned with debris, and I think as humans we tend to leave rubbish wherever we go, and space is no different. How significant and how big a challenge is it to actually clean up space, particularly within low Earth orbit?
I think that's just almost an insurmountable problem. I'm not sure how you would do that because there's a lot of space out there, right? So it'd be really difficult, I think, to clean it up. But I think, one of the steps to take moving forward is to specify how satellites are built so that you can make sure they come back in one piece instead of in lots of little pieces. But like Tim said about the depress, I think that was our biggest hazard on board because space station will protect you for about a marble and smaller, and we can see about a baseball and larger, but there's that category between the marble and the baseball that we're exposed to. So, my thought was, hey, if something's going to go wrong, it's going to happen at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're going to be tired, and everybody's going to be confused. And so we were very well trained just to make sure we knew exactly what to do.
Okay, so another question. This is from Murdo Glenn, who's 10 years old. Does your hair or fingernails grow, or do your hair or fingernails grow faster in space than on Earth?
This is going to have to be a subjective answer because...
Have you been comparing?
Yeah, qualitative answer. I didn't actually measure the rate of growth of my fingernails or hair, but we would tend to cut our hair once every 2 weeks, and I don't think it grew at a different rate from here back on Earth.
Did you do a similar study?
I don't think it changes necessarily, but one thing about your nails and hair in space, you can't just clip the nails over the sink, right? You got to make sure that you do this in a very methodical way, and same with your haircuts. And so we have these clippers. It has a hose that's connected to a vacuum cleaner because you want to take all that debris and contain it.
Mm-hmm. And you raise a good point there. So you're living together as housemates, roommates for 6 months. I mean, do you guys get on, or is one of you less tidy than the other?
I would say Tim and I are very tidy as those other guys, right?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't
you
my,
took out
wasn't
the
my
trash.
mess.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a question now from 7-year-old Eve Green, and it's a question about planets. So both of you, what is your favourite planet within this solar system, and why?
Earth.
Yeah.
He's
so
stolen
easy,
that.
right? I mean, we can live here. You don't have to have a special
here,
environment. You don't have to wear a spacesuit. It's a pretty awesome place.
Not Jupiter, gas giant. No.
What's that?
Not Jupiter. You don't want to visit the gas giant and have that.
I mean, if you have to visit another celestial body, I frankly would like to go to the moon because, you can see it out your window, right? And it's right there. And I think we'll learn so much by going there. And it's, I think, a next big step, but that would probably be my favorite one besides Earth.
Do you think after the International Space Station runs to the end of its lifetime, a moon base could be the next logical step for human exploration?
It's hard to say. You know, when it comes to space exploration, it's really not a technical issue. It's really more of a political issue, because you need to have the political will and the financing and the money that's supported by governments to take that next big step. So really, it depends on where those partnerships are. If the partnership says we're going to Mars, then that'll be the next big step.
Okay. And another question, this is from Charlotte Murray, who's 8 years old. If you were to cut yourself badly in space, so we're talking about hazards here, what effect does zero gravity have on blood flow and clotting? Which is quite an impressive question, Charlotte.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's yours.
That's, goodness me. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer this question, but if we do cut ourselves in space, we have a pretty decent medical cabinet up there. And of course, we have, again, the support of our flight surgeons. So, in terms of the blood flow, well, any liquid in space is going to have some sort of surface tension, and so it's going to tend to pool in pockets on the skin, so depending on where it is. I mean, for example, Tim mentioned about during the spacewalk, his helmet filling up with water, and the eye sockets make great areas for things to pool. So if you ever put water in your eye in space, it will just sit there in your eye socket because of the tension there. So the blood would tend to pool together. If you shook it off, then it would form spheres, and it would then make a big mess all over the space station. As for clotting, I mean, that's a great question. I don't think it would be any different. I mean, really, the environment on the space station is just like the environment here in Usher Hall. It's the same temperature, it's the same pressure. We do have fans keeping the air flowing. The only one difference in space is our carbon dioxide level is about 10 times higher than it is. But other than carbon dioxide, it's pretty much the same. So I'd have thought clotting's probably about the same too.
That was an incredible question.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to add to?
Well, I would just say that if we had a really bad cut, we're both trained to sew up the other guy.
Yeah.
It wouldn't look pretty.
You trust him?
Yeah, it would be a pretty sew job, but it would be okay. But the main thing you have to worry about really with small cuts is that they get infected easily, because your immune system is a little bit suppressed, and so you have to be very careful about little cuts on your hands.
And actually looking at medical work, and as we explore further into space for longer duration missions, and I know there's a base on the Antarctic, which is involved in medical studies, how significant is the potential that we might have to one day perform an operation in space? I mean, you joke about stitching someone up, but one day that will be a reality.
I think we will. And as Tim mentioned, really, when we transition from space station operations to those longer missions, we need more autonomy. And at the moment, we enjoy the luxury of being in almost permanent communication with Earth. We enjoy the luxury of having a ground support team that we can call to instantly. And we also enjoy the luxury of, if something really goes badly wrong, we can get into the Soyuz spacecraft, and within about 3 hours, we can be back here on planet Earth. So on our next phase of space exploration, we're going to have to take our medical care to that next level of autonomy, which will probably involve having to do minor surgery.
Yeah.
So for anyone who might aspire to be an astronaut, you don't just have to be, you could be any sort of science or STEM discipline. It doesn't just have to be physics or maths. Medicine's just as important.
Oh, absolutely, yes. We have medical doctors who are astronauts right now.
Okay, so we have a question now from Twitter with the hashtag #QuestionTim, not question time. Jane, I'm glad you're laughing. Jane Atri, and she asks, what was the most challenging experiment you carried out on the mission? So we've done your favourite, but what was the most challenging?
Wow, one of the most challenging things I was involved in was installing something called an electrostatic furnace in the Japanese laboratory. And this is a wonderful piece of equipment. It's going to do amazing research on new composite materials. And we have something similar called an electromagnetic levitator, which I love these names that they give these equipment. That's in the European laboratory. And we're burning things inside a small furnace to investigate them. And in the electromagnetic levitator, we're just looking at metal alloys because it's using magnetism for the levitation. But in the Japanese one, electrostatic furnace, because it's electrostatic, means they can use composite materials. So we're looking at different composites, which is very exciting. But installing that was a real challenge. I think it ended up taking us perhaps 5 or 6 times longer than we'd expect to install. A very complicated piece of equipment, but we eventually got it in, and it's up and running, and it's performing experiments.
And
I was going to say, I think probably the most challenging one for me was working with this large robot we call Robonaut onboard station. And most of the equipment we have on board is actually designed to be maintained in space. And we have very specific procedures, and we're trained on how to execute those. But Robonaut was really sort of taking advantage of the opportunity to send it to space and be able to use it there. But since we don't have procedures for it and it's not designed for it, working closely with the ground team to identify exactly how to repair it was really challenging. But actually, after a couple sessions working with the engineers on the ground, it was really fun to be able to work closely with them and to make some progress.
And do you have a robot helper on the space station?
Well, it's designed to show that we can use it for things. And so it's really very at the beginning levels of what we can use. Right now, it's not really a helper.
So do you think maybe in a few years, Robonaut could do all the cleaning so you guys don't have to fight over that?
That would be great, yeah. Definitely.
Okay, the next question is from Andrew Panton, who's 79, so someone of all ages. What did you miss, Tim, most other than your family when you were in space? And this is to Tim Peake.
Tim 1 or Tim 2, yeah. What did
Tim
I
and Tim.
miss most other than family? I think other than family, you miss the outdoors, and I certainly miss the fresh air. And not meaning that the air in the space station is particularly bad, but it is this artificial environment. It's the lighting is just constant frequency, white lighting. It's a very sterile environment, and there's no green. And sometimes I would just wish to be out on a run through the woods, feeling cold rain against my face, those kind of things. So that's what I've probably missed the most.
I'd have to say, I agree with Tim that just nature in general. When they opened the hatch after we landed, all the smells that we hadn't had for those 6 months were almost overwhelming. I remember the smell of the grass. You could smell the burning vehicle. Not such a good smell, but when we were in the helicopters flying from...
Get out of that vehicle.
That was not so great. But then flying in the helicopter to Cruddas was the smell of diesel fuel, which wasn't great. But, just the fact that your whole sensory system had sort of been narrowly scoped for a period of time, and having that come back was pretty amazing.
And I have to ask, what did it smell like on the International Space Station, particularly when you first arrived?
I actually felt it was almost like a clinical smell, which is, I guess, not surprising. It's a laboratory. And that's why I say it's not a bad smell at all. Yeah. And then very quickly you get used to it. And so, really after the first few hours, it becomes a neutral smell to you. You don't smell that at all. One thing that we were always kind of challenging each other on was the smell of space. And it's the most incredibly hard smell to describe. I think the smells in general are very difficult to describe. But for example, when somebody comes back from a spacewalk, and you've had the vacuum of space in the airlock. So when you first open the airlock door, you can take a big smell. And also when we were launching Cube satellites out of the Japanese airlock, we did that several times. So we would be recovering them, and you would smell this. I think it was almost like a burnt metallic and ionizing kind of smell.
So space smells metally.
Yeah, with a bit of Marmite thrown in.
Yeah.
See, only a Brit would say that. Do you think it smells of Marmite, Tim?
No, I don't. In fact, like Tim said, it's really hard to describe smells. Last time I flew, I was listening to Daniel Levis, who was on STS-128. He was in a press conference, and someone asked him, what does space smell like? And he said, well, it smells like this. I thought, no, that's not right. And so he went through 3 or 4 descriptors. I think it's, like Tim said, it's really hard to describe what a smell is. And to me, it smells almost a little bit organic, maybe a little bit metallic, but it's a very unique thing.
Does it smell good or bad?
Neutral?
Yeah, neutral, yeah.
Okay, so we've got a question from John, who's 10 years old, and this is to both of you, or both of you can answer if you want. How do you brush your teeth in space?
Brushing teeth, I think you probably saw a short clip in that 5-minute movie that's played before. So brushing teeth is just the same in space as on Earth, with the exception of you don't have any running water, so you just put the toothpaste straight on the brush, and then you swallow everything. And then, take a glug of water if you want afterwards to rinse your mouth out.
Yeah, that's it.
Enjoyable experience?
It's fine.
No retainers at night?
The funny thing is, I used to just do somersaults when I was brushing my teeth, because there was nothing else you could really do, but it was just fun to pass the time whilst you're brushing your teeth.
Actually, talking of somersaults and larking about in space, Can you just talk through the video of you and Scott Kelly when he dressed up as a chimpanzee or an ape and chased you through the space station?
Yes, yeah, that was very funny. I mean, yeah, to have a gorilla chase you on the space station is fairly unique. But no, it's something we said, well, you know, we know that we're going to come back and do these kind of things, and we spent a lot of time talking to school children. What do school children love more than a gorilla? So we said, hey, let's do it. Let's have a clip of a gorilla in space, and it will be something fun to be able to show the school kids when we get back.
And do you play pranks on each other quite a lot, or is it?
Sometimes.
But you're not going to say.
No.
Okay, the next question is from JJ Sloan, who's aged 7 3/4. It's nearly 8 years old. That 3/4 is very important when you're 7. And it's, apart from walking, what was the most difficult thing about coming back to Earth?
Apart from walking, wow. I mean, it was I guess I was going to say the balance, but that's all tied into the whole walking. Other than that, I think, really, I think that's it, because once you've got your balance, once you're able to walk, then everything is completely normal. And I think, again, that's a testament to how good the human body is, because that's just really the one thing that you have to learn to do again. You very quickly learn how heavy things are. Somebody passed both Tim and I, one of the first tests we had to do was an iPad-based test. We've been doing this all the time in space. And so they passed an iPad, and it's like, wow, that iPad feels really heavy, and pick it up. And you know, you really can't believe how heavy things are, but you get used to that very quickly, and then once you've got used to walking again, it's like, well, hello planet Earth, I'm back and everything's normal.
The first day is not fun. I'm not sure. Actually, Tim and I spoke
Unless
about this.
you're Yuri.
Yeah, unless you're Yuri, then everything's fine. It's another day in the park, right? But the first day, you just don't feel good. I mean, you feel like you have the flu almost. You just feel achy and feel queasy because most head movements are really provocative. It can make you nauseous.
So you've had a few whiskeys the night before.
Kind of like that. It's like a hangover and the flu. What a great combo.
Yeah.
But you know, after about 24 hours, you feel a lot better. The other part that is not nearly the same in terms of intensity is your muscles are strong when you come back, but and you've lifted a lot, so you're pretty strong from all the exercises that you've done. But all the muscles aren't balanced the same, and so some might be a little bit weaker than they should be. Some are stronger. And so we started doing massages through NASA as part of our rehab, and that was really helpful just to get your body back into tune.
Okay, and your final question, because we're nearly out of time, and this comes from 6-year-old Anika Johnson, and I think it's a really good one to finish on as well. What was your favourite thing, and what is your favourite thing about space? Both. Gosh,
a favourite thing is really the slides I showed up there of the view of planet Earth. I mean, that's to me was the most unique, the most incredible experience that you can have from space flight, is to be able to look back on our planet from a different perspective, and just having the time up there to watch the planet change, to watch the northern hemisphere go from winter through spring and into summer, to see the weather systems developing, and to see storm fronts on a massive scale going across continents. And I've mentioned the aurora already, but just to see Earth and see how dynamic. I mean, it sounds cheesy. I was in our dynamic Earth this morning, but it is a dynamic Earth, and to see that with your own eyes was really incredible.
I completely agree with Tim. I mean, seeing the planet every day like that is such an opportunity. In fact, as we were going through all those photographs that we've taken on board station, it was sort of stirring up those same sort of emotions of looking out the windows and being able to take those photographs. Another part I think that is really important for me is just recognizing how adaptable we are as a species. And so, you know, after a while, you're carrying things with your legs and moving with your hands, or just turning your body however direction, and having the opportunity to live in space and to feel like you're just completely adapted to that environment was really special.
And just to conclude, both of you, what are your hopes for the future of space exploration, particularly for the young people in the world who are going to be the ones making that space future happen?
I think my hopes for the future of space exploration is that we can take this International Space Station partnership as a model for how to do it in the future. And as Tim mentioned, spaceflight exploration, it needs long-term political vision, and it needs stability, and it needs funding. And thankfully, that's what we have with the Space Station Partnership. And if we're going to successfully go to the moon, and if we're going to successfully go to Mars, we need to have that similar type of model.
I completely agree with Tim. The International Space Station is a great model for how to do this, because what we do right now is we take the expertise of of countries that have been doing this for a very long time. And if we can combine that same level of expertise and cooperation in the future, we'll do great things.
And would you agree that it is, you know, it might sound a bit naff to use a word we explained to you earlier, but exploration, or the exploration of space is what we're meant to do as a species, and it is essential.
I think there's this inherent piece in all of us that wants to explore, and it brings out the best in all of us. And if you put that in an international context, I think it's just one more element that we can do.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I just have something to read very quickly beforehand. So I'd like to say the event was produced by the Edinburgh International Science Festival. The next Science Festival will take place over the Easter holidays from the 1st to the 16th of April 2017. The programme will be announced in February, and thanks to the European Space Agency and the UK Space Agency for bringing Tim and Tim to us. Before we give them a round of applause, because I know you're keen to do that, if you want to check under your seats, you might have a special mission badge, so you need to do that. And also, both Tims will be at the... No one's going to clap now. Both Tims will be at the front of the hall shortly, so you can meet and greet them. But can we just give them both a huge round of applause for being here? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.